Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. On today's episode, we kick off the 2023 NHL Draft coverage with old friend Will Scouch, BFF of the show, comes on, gives us his kind of initial analysis of this draft. And we'll, of course, talk kind of guys right around the Sharks, top five-ish guys, and just kind of his thoughts of the draft. So all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, contributor at Fear the Fin and San Jose Hockey Now. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch us on YouTube. And we have BFF of the show, Will Scouch, back from hiatus. The draft, the Sharks are bad. There's no better time to look ahead than now. Will, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well, JD. How are you?
I am doing okay. I'm going to try to make this as evergreen as possible, but the Dolphins just lost a heartbreaker in the playoffs, and I am crying on the inside, but I'm going to forge ahead right now. So, Will, we're going to be kind of our first look at the draft this year, and we've heard just how amazing this draft class potentially could be. You know, of course, you have Connor Bedard at the top. You have Fantilli. There's a bunch of guys in this draft class. So how would you describe the 2023 NHL draft?
Yeah, I think the 2023 draft, I think that whenever people are like really hyping up a draft class, I always sort of urge a little bit of caution just because of the uncertainty inherent in what we're doing here and like how many things can change based on who drafts whom and how a player develops and how trainable they turn out to be and all those things. But I mean, I look at this year's draft class, and if I'm at the top part of it, you know, I'd say at least the top 5 picks or so. Like, I'm really excited. I'm getting a really exciting and useful player that will fill a really important role in the NHL and probably do pretty well doing it. And I think that also in this draft, I think after that top 5 group, it gets really even real fast. I think there's a lot of really strong players that maybe are very strong in certain areas and maybe a little weaker in others, and they, you know, you might need to work on things, whether it's making the good better or the downsides a little bit better off. You know, there's just a few players that have really interesting talent profiles, I guess, and that stretches for quite a while. And then beyond that, I mean, I think that, you know, the distribution of talent is really even, and there are players that I have ranked in the mid to late second round that personally, if I were to get them in the mid to later rounds of the draft, I'd be really excited to land, and I think that there might be some upside to leverage out of them. But I mean, do I think that we're going to look at this draft and see like 60 NHL players that are all like pretty useful NHL players? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be like this legendary world-changing draft. But if things go right, like I think first round picks this year, you could do a lot of damage. I think there are guys that might slip through the first round for preconceived notions that, you know, have varying levels of validity. But if you play your cards right and develop them right and are patient with them, I think you could end up with a really good player. So I mean, I think this year it's about the really high end group that I think is really special. Like, there's a lot of players this year that I think I would draft ahead of pretty much anyone last year, save for maybe a Logan Cooley. There's a lot of players that I would draft ahead of guys like Alexis Lafreniere or Quinton Byfield. You know, it's a really strong top group, I think, especially when you're thinking about how the NHL works and what is required to play in the NHL. And I think there's a lot of guys that check a lot of those boxes.
Yeah, you kind of answered one of my questions already. Was, so what do you think is the cutoff of like you're going to be really happy with your pick? You know, top 5, top 7, top 10, like.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of guys, again, like I said, there's a lot of guys where if I'm drafting them, if I have like a 12th overall pick, like there's going to be guys at 12 that when you draft them, you can be really excited. You know, like I look at Oliver Moore is an example of a guy who's really moved up my boards over the year. He's playing second line minutes on the NTDP team, but I think he looks not at all out of place, driving a lot of possession on that team. Really, really skilled player. And you might be able to get him in the mid to late rounds. Like, he's not a perfect player. There's some gaps in his game, but in terms of an offensive transition guy who can create in the offensive zone, is a pretty good finisher on his own, really, really skilled, and knows how to work passing lanes and open lanes and make plays in transition. I think that's really, really valuable. And so where he kind of goes from here could be really exciting. But if he's, I think he could be a top 10 pick, but that's an example of a player that in the mid first round, you can be really excited about him. I mean, there are guys I think that might not go in the first round, like William Whitelaw, who's in the USHL. He's a guy who just brings great joy to the game, but he's very, very flawed. Like, he's got a lot of problems where you watch him and you go, you really could be something, but there's stuff that holds him back. And I think that that's a big reason why he's just under a point per game in the USHL. But I watch him play and I go, this could be one of the more impactful players that you could draft out of that league if you play your cards right and you're patient. So there's a lot of that flying around, and it's going to be a matter of who drafts them. But if I'm a fan and I don't have a lottery pick this year, like what I've been telling people who feel like the sky is falling because they don't have a realistic shot of landing Connor Bedard or Adam Fantilli or whoever, you're still going to have the option of picking someone really fun and exciting that could make a pretty big difference, even if it isn't like franchise rescuing, like really, really good pieces to build your team with, and maybe not the key to the future, but really solid pieces, especially offensively and at the forward position, and maybe some more offensive leaning defensemen, I think.
All right, we've gone this far. We've mentioned Connor Bedard's name once. He's pretty good at hockey, right?
So they say. I don't know.
He's the best prospect since McDavid. I mean,
probably.
Right.
Yeah, I would say so. McDavid, Matthews, like probably up in that tier.
Like, I mean, what we saw at the World Juniors, I know you don't want to make too much out of a tournament, right? But again, when you're kind of one of the youngest guys there and you're doing that and you're putting up numbers that we haven't seen, or you're getting tossed around with guys like Lindros, like getting Bedard changes your franchise, right? If the Sharks potentially,
it certainly helps. Having Connor Bedard certainly helps. I don't know. Look, I went into the World Junior tournament with him and Fantilli kind of pretty close in my head. I thought Bedard brings a tremendous amount of skill and offensive upside, and his shot is just otherworldly, and he's a threat every single time he touches the puck in the offensive zone. And that's hard to say for any player that I've ever seen play, even at the junior level. Adam Fantilli, I think, brings other skills that complement that type of player really, really, really well. And I think we saw at the World Juniors a taste of kind of what Adam Fantilli could bring to a team. Like, you don't see 6'2", 6'3" centers like that move like him, have skill like he does, finish plays like he does. I think he's a bit of but after watching this tournament, I look at Connor Bedard and go, yeah, no one can really hold a candle to what that guy can do. I mean, not to also like put, rain on the parade a little, but I get, under normal circumstances, if the World Junior were like any other World Junior year, the Austrians wouldn't have been there. It would have been Belarus, and the Russians would probably be there as well. And I think when you saw Connor Bedard match up against teams that were out there trying to kill the Canadians, like the Slovakian team and the Czechs in the gold medal, you saw a little bit more of where I think Bedard still has some learning to do. Maybe, like, it's not necessarily a talent thing, but it's just an experience thing, I think.
And he's also 17. And,
exactly, right.
Like,
I'm not judging. Judging, but I'm saying, like, in those games, you can kind of see where there might be, some issues. Like, I think it was against Slovakia. Like, he kind of overhandled the puck at the blue line. Like, he kind of loves to cut across the middle, shallow across the blue line, not really cutting in too deep into the offensive zone. And he coughed up the puck on that play, or someone challenged him and they came back the other way. He wasn't really back checking super well and ended up on his stomach, and just they outweighted him, and it ended up going in the net. And I think that was a pretty important goal for Slovakia to score. And it was just one of those plays where it's like, okay, like there's still some things he has to learn and some things he has to figure out, especially against teams that play him hard and forecheck hard on him, because he is very, very skilled and he is very agile, but he still doesn't really quite have the length and reach to like protect pucks really, really, really well at the next level, I don't think. But I don't have any, it doesn't really matter that much to me. Like I'm being very, very nitpicky. Like,
Yeah.
but because in that tournament, you also saw things that with Regina that I haven't really seen, like his ability to distribute the puck. And it seemed like every single time in the offensive zone when he touched the puck with Regina, when he touches the puck in the offensive zone, he sees it all the time as a scoring opportunity for himself. He'll try to create something for himself. Where in the World Juniors, I think you saw a lot more sort of one-touch passing, a lot more playmaking, a lot more creativity out of him. And I think that that's something that with Regina, he just doesn't really need to do as much of. So that kind of alleviated another sort of set of concerns for me, where with Regina, like I'll see him rip up the right side boards, get to the goal line, and then just rifle one from the goal line. And he does that multiple times. And I'm going, well, that doesn't work in the NHL. You don't see NHL guys scoring like that on NHL goaltenders, but then you see him at the World Juniors and he is going deep into the offensive zone on puck carries, but he's using the middle of the ice a lot more and sort of stopping up and building gaps on defensemen rather than just sort of going, I'm going to go end to end and just try to make something happen. And usually that works in the WHL because he's Connor freaking Bedard. So
Yeah.
it was just very interesting for me to see both of those guys at the top end of the draft on Canada fill different roles, I think, well. And Connor Bedard, I mean, obviously, like he's going to go out there against Germany and Austria and absolutely shred them to pieces. But he still was one of the better players on the ice, if not the best player on the ice by a bit of a margin against better competition, which, again, like for a guy first overall, likely to go first overall almost certainly, you want to see. And I think that he definitely showed a lot better than Adam Fantilli, but Fantilli also showed, I thought, pretty well. I think just by comparison, it wasn't quite on the same level, to say the least.
Yeah, before we get into Fantilli, I do want to take a quick break, talk to you guys about our friends over at Athletic Greens. Right now, new year, new me. You see Will, new mustache. If you want to kind of work on maybe your gut health, work on your energy, recovery, and focus, aging, all those things, Athletic Greens is the way to go. One delicious scoop of your AG1, cup of water, shake it up, drink it before you even have your morning coffee, and you're good to go. You're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole foods, source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. Great thing about it, it's less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health. It's cheaper than drinking your cold brew habit. And it's cheaper than going to the store and buying all the pills by yourself. They have over 7,000 5-star reviews. Recommended by professional athletes. So they're making it really easy right now. Go to athleticsgreens.com /NHL network. You get a 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D, 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Again, just visit athleticgreens.com /NHL network to take ownership over your health, pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right. So yeah, Fantilli, again, he presumed to be kind of the second pick. Another guy who I really, really like, we'll talk about here in a minute. Doing stuff we haven't seen in the NCAA with Michigan, since Jack Eichel. Mm-hmm. Quiet World Juniors. Again, like you kind of said, you don't want to try to make up too much out of a world tournament, one tournament, right? And especially because his role wasn't the same as Bedard's, but not worried at all. You think Fantilli was just kind of filling his role for that?
I don't think I'm worried at all. I think that he was better than people are saying. I don't think
just because
he was
didn't score, right?
I don't think he was spectacular, but I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. If you look at the historical production rates for draft eligible kids at the tournament, if you're up near a point per game like he was, you're doing pretty well. I mean,
just a point per game. God.
Yeah, I know, right? Like imagine that, right? So I think with Fantilli, yeah, I think part of the thing is he's playing on the wing. He was playing on the wing a lot more in this tournament, where I don't think he's played that much there in Michigan to this point. Like he's usually got a little bit more space to play with. He's more of a breakout generator on his own. I mean, he did do that quite a bit with Canada, but he was kind of relied upon as more of a, I don't want to say power forward, but just more of like he was relied on less for his puck transportation and everything, and was more of a physical guy. He got some scoring chances and he scored at a decent rate for this junior tournament for his age. I think that I got kind of what I expected out of him. I love Adam Fantilli's speed and the reach that he's got. The skill level is also really good. There were just some moments where it was almost extremely impressive, right? Like pulling pucks around defenders off the rush at pretty high pace, and just these high level things that usually works against lower level competition that he's had before. There's some things that you identified as well in that tournament where it's like, I wish it was a little bit better. His ability to just sort of drop the shoulder and just take control of possession a little bit more and fight through pressure a little bit better. Like, it's funny, between him and probably another person we're going to talk about in Leo Carlsson, I think they could learn a lot from each other's style of play, right? Like, I think Carlsson could learn that maybe he might need a little bit of a quicker set of feet, a little bit better skill in transition, like what Fantilli has. And Fantilli could look at Carlsson and go, well, this guy really knows how to fight through pressure, make plays through people's feet along the boards, and just never really is out of the play. Whereas Fantilli kind of sometimes takes himself out of the play by flipping pucks in the air in ways that it's unlikely that guys are going to receive them, or just sort of not really reading the ice extremely well. But that, again, like, we're being kind of nitpicky about a guy who I think in a year, maybe other than like Jack Hughes, I probably would be taking like first overall. I have a lot of time for how Adam Fantilli plays the game. I think that as an NHL player, I would love to have him in my system. Like, just a guy that size that can skate like that, can shoot like that, has skill like that. Like, if a team drafts him and hope to turn him into like the next Eric Lindros, I think they're not going to get that. But if they draft him and probably want like the next, like a Matt Sundin or something, where he's just a big skilled guy who can control transitions and finish really, really well, then I don't think that's out of the question with Fantilli. And that's the type of player that I think I'd want him to be. And I think we saw flashes of that. It just, again, like, his role was a little more limited. He wasn't playing his natural position that I've largely seen him play. But he did show some of the things that I think hold him back from being like a truly, truly sort of real threat to Connor Bedard, especially based on what we saw out of Bedard at the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're kind of maybe nitpicking these guys, but these guys are really, really good at hockey.
Well, yeah, I mean,
like,
you don't want to take the
Fantilli
wrong
would be,
guy, right?
Yeah, Fantilli would be like first overall in like,
most years,
years type of thing. So, Leo Carlsson, who is he the best consolation prize potentially ever if you're not getting Fantilli or Bedard? Because I came away super impressed with Leo Carlsson. I watched Team Sweden very heavily just because of Philip Biested and Carlsson, who I know wasn't 100% in this tournament, but like, again, what he's doing in the SHL hasn't been done since the Sundin tournament. Like, it's
like a long time.
Yeah,
it's been a minute, but. Yeah, I think that, he's kind of cemented himself, at least for me, as a top 5 guy. Like, there's no question in my mind that Carlsson will be a good NHL player, especially as a 200-foot guy. Like, he is clearly a pretty gifted and confident puck distributor and puck carrier. I mean, he kind of lacks the speed and pace of play and skill level that a guy like Adam Fantilli has, but he has like determination and resilience
Mike Greer is just
and he has
right now.
he I've seen, and this, I don't think this happened much in the World Juniors, but in the SHL I've seen him like looking off certain passing decisions and sort of deceiving opponents and looking one direction, sending passes a completely different direction, like these sort of next level sort of hockey sense traits that I think a lot of scouts really, really like, that most guys don't show at that age. And he just has this way of getting through traffic. He's not the most skilled guy, but when he tries to put the puck through your legs and get around you, he's got the reach and the resilience and the strength to sort of pull it off a lot of the time. And I think we saw a lot of that in the tournament. Real good quick strike offensive guy below the goal line. He made some plays with Philip Biested deep in the offensive zone that I thought were, again, like, when you look at him and then you go look at an NHL hockey player play, especially a big center that plays in the middle of your lineup, like a solid second line guy that plays behind maybe your top end center on a really good team, he shows a lot of those same characteristics, right? He battles in the corners. He gets through traffic. He works hard. There's a lot that he brings that I think translates to the NHL really, really well. And if he sort of if he develops sort of the speed and the strength on his body a little bit more than he already has, I think he could be a really sort of good 200-foot power center that has some good finishing ability as well. I really liked him at this tournament, and he might be one of the better sort of number 3 guys that I have ranked. I have a couple of guys behind him that are smaller, but I think bring a lot of skill and creativity and work rate to the game, that while Carlsson has it, they might have a little bit more offensive output. But I again, if you're not drafting one of the top 2 guys on my board, I still don't think you should be crying. It's a really good top group, and Carlsson should be a really good piece to build with. He might not be a franchise, rebooting player, but he certainly has the potential to really do some damage in the NHL, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a team has a really good 2020 draft class that's starting to come along, you have a nice, really top end piece in your 2021 draft class.
Who do you have in mind? I don't know.
So yeah. Leo Carlsson feels like it'd be a nice fit for those guys. Kind of add some diversity to a lot of the small forwards you drafted earlier, and now you're kind of adding a little junk in the trunk there. Before we continue, we're going to talk about kind of some of the guys maybe in the second round, some of the defensemen, because we know the Sharks are in desperate need of a defenseman potentially in the second round. Do want to take a quick break, talk to you guys about our friends over at BetOnline. You guys know BetOnline is your number one source for betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest trends and odds out there for every professional and amateur league out there. You got pro football, you have playoffs going on right now. You have NBA, you have college basketball. They've got you covered over at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, which you do because you're listening to one right now, you can check those out at BetOnline as well. The fastest, easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today or use your mobile device or more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Michkov, what's the deal? Very Seinfeld voice. He's not coming over for a couple years, right? Like whatever team drafts him, he's there till 2026, I believe, is what his kind of 25, 26, something like that. Is it one of those things you draft him, you let him sit, and then you hopefully you have Kirill Kaprizov 2.0 just showing up at your doorsteps in a couple years?
I've said this. I've been trying to preach this every single time this gets asked. People ask this question to me all the time, and like the way I see it is, look, most OHL, like let's say he played in the OHL, usually they don't come into the NHL for at least a season, maybe even 2. Like Brennan Othman, are people concerned about Brennan Othman after he was drafted?
Yeah, but you don't draft. Yeah, he's not like the 4th overall pick potentially.
Yeah, but what difference does it make? Like, when has there ever been a Russian player drafted that never came over ever? Like, I don't think he's gonna be in Russia forever. I don't think he's gonna be there as long as Kirill Kaprizov was. I also don't think Minnesota these days really cares that much that Kaprizov didn't show up until he did. He just showed
up and he's ready to go.
He
put out 100
points.
Exactly.
So I don't think about that. I think it would be asinine to look at, especially if you're a bad team. Like if you're still rebuilding, I think it would be crazy to look at a Matvei Michkov and go, yeah, he's good, but man, we won't see him for a couple of years at least. Like I remember people said the same thing about Vasily Podkolzin, right? His contract lasts 2 or 3 more years and blah, 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 blah. Like you're going to have to talk to his agent. You're going to have to figure out if he even it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask of like, well, would you even bother wanting to come to Columbus or San Jose or whatever? And you hope they answer honestly when they say yes. And you hope they answer no if they're genuinely thinking no. But that's not information we would know. So could it affect his draft situation? Perhaps, I would think, but I don't know. And this is me talking. I also don't have Michkov particularly like in the top 5. Like I think he's a very good player for sure. He brings a lot of really high-end traits, but he doesn't bring a lot of things that I personally look for in a player at this age. It sounds crazy because he's scoring so many goals, but I am always scared. And if you look in the history of the NHL draft, any prospect drafted pretty much anywhere that scores a lot of goals and not much else ends up problematic. Joakim Kamel scored a lot of goals last year, and I found him to be problematic. Alexander Holtz scored a lot of goals in his draft year, and he is struggling to come along. I think the last one I can think of that has really worked out is Anthony Mantha, and he was like a 20th overall pick. Like, there's a lot of them that you can point to in history where it's like, okay, yes, you can score goals, but in the NHL, being like, it's the way I see it is like there's a chain of possession, and at the end of it, you have a shot on goal. If what you're really good at is the end of a chain of possession,
there's so many things that have to go right.
There's a whole lot of things that need to happen in order for that to happen.
Yep.
So with Michkov, like, yes, I think there are things that he does really well. He's got a great set of hands. He'll challenge you one-on-one. He'll try to put pucks between your legs. He'll know how to get around you. And when it works, it's really impressive. But I think he lacks the sort of super duper high end foot speed that a guy that size needs to really move the puck consistently. His puck management, he doesn't really pass the puck a whole lot, and when he does, it can be really hit or miss. Like, he'll skate into pressure a lot and then try to spin off of it and make a play from there. And if he doesn't have a really good sort of sense of where his line mates are, he turns the puck over. And he'll be really lackadaisical with puck retrievals in the defensive end and trying to get the puck out of his own end. Before going to Sochi, he was cherry picking for his offense and really flying the defensive end a lot. With Sochi, that's kind of been a little bit better. I've watched a couple of games there. I think he is showing a little bit more of a typical winger's game at that with that team in the KHL. But and then I look at how he's scoring his goals. Like, he scored an even strength goal for Sochi the other day when a guy he finished off a guy. He finished off a player making a play from below the goal line. He just went to the net and scored, which is great.
Yeah.
And there was another one where a teammate shot the puck, missed the net, it hit the boards and came right off the boards onto Matvei Michkov's stick, and he put it in, right? Like, the fact that he can bury those is good. Like, that you want a guy who can bury chances that are just put right in front of him, and that's valuable. But I look at other players in this year's draft that I just, like watching Gavin Brindley at the World Juniors this year. Yeah, he doesn't really have that sort of nose for scoring and finishing plays, but by God, that guy was taking pucks out of the defensive end and moving them into the offensive zone and making plays for other guys constantly. And I didn't think he was going to be as good as he was at the World Juniors. There's a couple of defensemen that I really, really have liked, and I think they bring a lot to the game that is really hard to find. With Michkov, he's very good. He's in my top 10, but he's at 10. Like, he's a guy where it's like, if I want a scorer, right? If I already have a lot of really talented puck distributors and really talented playmakers and a couple of defensemen lying around that are really valuable, and there's a guy that you just want to be a gifted scorer, you put him on an NHL power play, he's going to score. Yeah. You put him out at even strength, he could chip in as an offensive player for sure, right? Like, I'm not saying he's bad, but I'm just saying, people are talking, locked in at 3 or 2 or 4. And it's just, that seems a little bit risky to me. It's just, you're really betting that a lot is going to change over the next few years, because it goes back to that cycle of possession. He's a guy where a lot of the times I find things need to happen for his benefit that he can't really do consistently on his own yet. And then he's the one sort of finishing plays off, granted in good ways, but there's it's just a trend that I've noticed over the years, and he sort of seems to be another example of that. And he's still trying to work it out. But my philosophy is I'll drop him to where I think I would put him, and then for the rest of the year, his play with Sochi will move him up the board accordingly, as if, maybe I've overcorrected and I'll just sort of move him up as the year goes on. So again, people in my YouTube comments seem to think that I think he sucks and that I hate Russians and that I hate Russia. I know, but it's like, look, you guys all watch me to like get my thoughts and stuff. And it's like, if my thoughts on one player that flies against what some people think, and he's still in my top 10, like, is what gets you off the boat, then like, it's unfortunate, but it would be disingenuous for me to lock him in the top 5 and then be like, yeah, but if I had a top 5 pick, I'm not sure I would do it, so
makes sense.
It's tough.
All right. We've heard a lot about the forwards. Who's the best, who's your top rated defenseman kind of at the midpoint here?
Yeah. I mean, I really like Axel Sandin Pellikka, the Swedish kid. I think that he's a work in progress. I think there's stuff that really needs some work, especially on the defensive side of the puck. But his puck handling and deception and transition and just ability to maintain possession is so good. Like, he's just so clever and deceptive and smart, and it's just, he's a guy I did not even think for a second was going to be a guy as high on my board this year as he is.
Where's he at ranked on your board right now?
He's at 6. Like, I think he's great. Like, I think he's the best defenseman available. It's a really even group, I'd say, from 6 to about 15 or 16. And there's a few defensemen in there, but he's the guy who I think brings the sort of NHL qualities that I think an offensive defenseman in the NHL really needs. Really skilled, really deceptive, pretty good skater, pretty mobile, but I think it needs to utilize it a little better, especially defensively. But there's a lot of things that Sandin Pellikka brings to the table that I think just really helps. He's not overly risky. I think he's still learning what he's able to do. And I think the World Juniors kind of exposed some limitations where he would take on a little bit too much responsibility, get himself into a little bit of trouble, be a little bit lackadaisical and sort of take his foot off the pedal a little bit. And he paid for that a few times. But when he was dialed in, I thought he looked really solid. Really good puck mover. Again, just a really good sort of possession defenseman with a lot of good offensive tools that I personally really, really like. So he's the top defenseman on my board, but I'd say him and Dmitry Simashev in Russia are two guys that I think are really sort of competing for my best defenseman in the draft, and they're both very different players, but I think they both, it depends on what you're looking for, but I think they both would fit very, very good needs on an NHL team.
All right. Who's been kind of the biggest riser as you've gotten to the midpoint of the season here for you?
There's a few. I mean, it's funny how close this draft is. There's a lot of guys that I have ranked a lot lower than what a lot of people have. For example, I'm a lot lower on guys like Colby Barlow, Dalibor Dvorsky, Braden Yeager. All these guys are like late firsts on my board right now. I think
Barlow, Yeager like top 5 potential,
right, which to me makes no sense from after watching him all year. Like there's easily at least 15 or 20 players that I would absolutely draft over a Braden Yeager, but he's still in my first round, I think. Or he's on the cusp. He's in a group that entails my end of my first round, which is fine, and I think that's reasonable. But to me, those guys moving down creates a lot of room for a number of other players to maybe replace them in that top group. And I think that Sandy Pellica was a guy I never thought would have been in my top 10 starting the season. But after about 2 games of watching him, I go, okay, this guy's probably going to move up quite a bit. Dmitry Simashev, I really liked last year playing in the MHL, but this year he started the year in the KHL. I think his production is only just starting to pick up, but he has been a really, really interesting player that, based on the central scouting ranking, you could probably get in the 2nd or 3rd round, which I would be thrilled about. Oliver Moore, I didn't expect again to see him come up as high on my board as he has been in the last, I'd say, month and a half. He's really, every single time I watch him, I'm going, yeah, I would take him over this guy and this guy and this guy. And he's kind of worked his way into my top 12-ish area, I would say, is where I kind of think about him. There's a lot of them. Like I could keep going. Like Timur Mukhanov is a Russian kid playing on the same team as Mikhail Gulyayev, who I think is one of the most undervalued players in the entire draft. He's small. He's 5'8", 5'9", but he's an absolute speed demon. He's just insanely skilled. I think, there was one game I watched the other day of him in the VHL, which is the Russian sort of 2nd division pro league, where he very easily could have had like 4 points in a game from like 2 goals and 2 assists. Like the goals would have been just, him being in front of the net and just slapping the crap out of a puck and the goalie just making a 10-bell save a couple of times in the game. A couple of really nice plays he made from below the goal line, especially. Like he plays at full pace all over the ice all the time, and I love him. But there's, there's tons. I think there's a lot of guys that have just shot at my board. Gavin Brindley has been moving up all year. Luca Cagnoni has moved up quite a bit for me. From the start of the year until now, Quinton Musty is a guy who's just moved up more and more and more. Every single time I see him, I go, okay, he's better than the last time I saw him. He's, especially based on where he was at the Holenka. There's a lot of players like this, and based on where I was in September, as is tradition, there's been a lot of movement. But my top group definitely looks a lot different.
I thought once you made a decision in September, that was it. You were not allowed to.
Usually that's the case. Yeah, you just stick your flag in the sand and you call it a day. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to just call it a day in September. You're never wrong when you do that. But yeah, lots has changed, and there's a lot of guys that I've really, really liked that. Again, it's this really wide group of really good prospects that bring a lot of things that I could see the argument for some over others, but they're all pretty good players. And I think that if you play your cards right and the chips fall the right way in the draft, you could end up with a heck of a draft class based on how sort of average lists are going and what the CSS thinks about some of these players now that we know.
All right, I'll get you out of here on this. So the Sharks I think defense is one of their big needs, especially if they go on to trade Ryan Merkley, which is kind of expected. They don't really have, I know I like Havlid, but he's kind of missed most of the season. They don't really have that kind of puck moving offensive defenseman. Who are some guys to maybe keep an eye on, early 2nd round type of guys, as the Sharks are probably going to be picking very high in the 2nd round this year?
Yeah, I think the most optimistic and probably the most fun player to slip out of the 1st round that plays that kind of way would be Mikhail Gulyayev. He's horrifying. Like he is so scary when he doesn't have the puck and so scary a lot of the time. But when he does have the puck, he's just a monster. Like watching him at the Russian junior level, he absolutely shouldn't be playing there. He just gets the puck below the goal line and he's off like a rocket up the ice and just gets the puck in the offensive zone and makes a play and scores points. That's all he does. And it's really impressive, but there's a lot of things to work out. And I feel like NHL scouts might look at him and go, yeah, you're terrifying. And I don't think we draft you in the first round. But I think you could really take a nice gamble if you want that sort of another crack at a sort of Ryan Merkley-esque trajectory, if you want another go at something like that, then fine. If you want something a little less, maybe
a little safer.
Yeah, a little safer, maybe like a Luca Cagnoni with Portland might be a guy that's available in the second round. Like, I think he's a really good puck carrier, really skilled guy. I mean, I think defensively, again, he is not perfect, but he's been a guy where I'm surprised that more people don't have him in the first round. Like Central Scouting has him in 34th in North America, which to me means like a second round draft pick. And I'd be more than happy to get a Luca Cagnoni in the second round. Just again, like that puck carrying guy. I think Caden Price could be an interesting one. I could see a world where he falls out of the first round just because this season he's one of the more frustrating players for me to watch, because there's some moments where you go, oh my goodness, he's playing like one of the most skilled and creative offensive defensemen in this draft. But then he'll alternate that with, what were you thinking doing this play, right? Like what, he'll make mistakes. He'll send soft passes into dangerous space for his opponents. He'll just make some decisions or just take the foot off the gas pedal a little too much. And it sort of really limits his impact on the game. But I think if he's also very young. He's one of the youngest draft eligibles likely to be in the first round. And if he slips out of the first round and you leave him in the WHL for 2 more years, like I think he's a month away from being eligible next year. And he's been one of the more productive young defenders in the WHL over the last couple of years. So I was hoping for him to sort of take a step in the right direction this year, but he kind of has struggled. So you might be able to buy low on him maybe if he is available in the early second round. And if you want, I think he is a little bit more dependable on the defensive side of the puck, especially off the puck. But then I think you can leverage a lot with sort of the skill and the skating ability that he's displayed. It's just a matter of being patient and sort of bringing him along the right way. So I think there's going to be some options in the second round. Tanner Melendek is the last one I'll go over. He's just if you just want a kid where you're betting on skating, like he's a really good option. Really gifted skater. He's a crisp passer. I'm surprised he's not scoring more than he already is. I think his scoring has picked up in the last little while, but he's a guy where I'm sitting there going, yeah, he can shoot, he can pass, he can skate. He's mobile. Like his defensive game is stick first, not really physical, but it's okay. Like it's good enough. And his footwork is good enough where he can sort of gap up and manage gaps pretty well. So I've liked him. And I think that's one where if he again slips out of the first round and his Central Scouting rank is 36th in America, like that again might be a second round pick. And I think it's possible he's a first rounder, but if you're talking like, let's say the Sharks are drafting 4th or 5th overall, and somehow you end up with, say, I don't know, a Zach Benson or an Andrew Crystal or a Matvei Michkov or whatever, and then in the second round you land yourself, a Caden Price or a Tanner Melendek or a Luca Cagnoni, then I think that you've done pretty well and you've got a couple of good options for the future.
Will, you've said it all.
Oh, hopefully.
Where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Scouching. You can also subscribe to me on YouTube, Scouching as well. It pops up when you search it. I do writing for McKean's Hockey. I also just started a Substack newsletter that I do a couple every few weeks. Thank you very much. I've been doing a capturing as many good draft eligibles that were at the World Juniors as possible and just going through their tape and been pulling clips and doing it. And it's taken a lot longer than I expected, but I think it'll be worth it. It's going to turn out pretty good. So that's at scouching.substack.com and you can subscribe there. It's free. But if you are a subscriber on Patreon at patreon.com/scouching or a YouTube member on my channel, any tier gets access to that newsletter before it goes public. So all of that is a good start. And you can follow me there. And there's lots more to come as we're entering, I guess, slowly getting into crunch time for draft season.
Oh, believe me, I've been ready for draft season since like the 3rd game of the season.
I can't imagine why, after having seen the Sharks play in Toronto not too long ago. It's been an adventure.
At least Erik Karlsson's fun. Erik Karlsson's so
yes, he is. 3 first-round picks, baby. Let's go.
3 first-round picks.
Yeah.
All right. That's going to do it for us today. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at MyFryHole. You can listen wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, or Amazon Music, Odyssey, wherever. You can watch on YouTube. You can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Till next time, Will, I'm sure you'll be back on several times before the draft. So until then, bye, friends.